there, my fellow lore lovers, and welcome back to Loreplay, the podcast where history gets weird, folklore gets feral, and I, your host Dana Pereira, continue to wonder how the fuck humanity survived the Middle Ages. Especially when I start to research a story like this. And then I remember, oh yeah, a good amount of them didn't. Tonight, we are diving into a story that will definitely stop you in your tracks and make you think, what in the Lisa Frank Fairy Forest hell is going on here? A story that begins with children, always suspicious, being exactly where they shouldn't be, looking like they've been dipped in radioactive pesto, and acting like they accidentally crossed the wrong dimensional border during recess. We are talking about the Green Children of Woolpit. A tale so bizarre, it manages to be historical, supernatural, kind of adorable, and definitely unsettling. And if my ass can get a little Christmassy, Green Children? In the Middle Ages. Anyone else getting Grinch vibes? Are we uncovering the actual origin of the Grinch? Maybe. Also, it is December, so Merry Christmas, you filthy animals. So, back to medieval Whoville. The whole saga kicks off in England during the 12th century. That beautiful era when the national pastime was famine. The vibes were mold, and the average life expectancy was, fingers crossed. This was a world ruled by King Henry II, a man famous for accidentally causing the murder of Thomas Becket and proving that passive-aggressive kingship is still full-ass aggression. Which, sidebar, I feel like I could do a whole-ass season on just kings and queens alone. The haunted history and the absolute abuse of power has yielded some wild shit. But before we get to kings, we need to go to Woolpit, a sleepy little village whose primary exports in the 1100s were grain, church gossip, and apparently portal children. And isn't it always the sleepy little village that has the craziest shit going on? We're gonna start on a warm late summer morning, the kind of day where the sun is out, the wheat fields are golden, and everyone is pretending that the plague isn't lurking around the corner ready to take out their entire family. You can almost picture it. Villagers going about their business, women hauling water, farmers sharpening tools, and then, near the edge of the field system, beside the massive wolf pits the town was named for, like literal pits in the ground used to trap wolves, because, medieval safety regulations were basically good luck, champ, the villagers notice movement. Children. 2 of them, a boy and a girl. Except something was wrong. Something was very wrong. These kids weren't just dirty or malnourished or shy. These children were green. Not metaphorically green, like new to the neighborhood or ate too many leafy vegetables green. No, these kids looked like little Grinches who lost their parental oversight. Their skin was green tinted, their hair a little off color. Their clothes were made from a strange, unfamiliar fabric, nothing like what English peasants wore. They were speaking a language that nobody recognized, and they were absolutely terrified. And listen, I know medieval people didn't have Google Translate or any way to ask Jeeves, but I'm still impressed that the villagers didn't immediately scream witch and try and hang them. Instead, they did something unexpectedly kind and shocking for the 1100s. They helped them. Imagine being green, dehydrated, wearing space elf couture, dumped into a literal fucking wolf pit, and suddenly surrounded by English villagers who bathe twice a year and talk like they've got gravel in their throats. If it looks like drama and walks like drama, it's definitely shaping up to be drama. The villagers take them into the home of Sir Richard, a local nobleman who was either incredibly compassionate or incredibly nosy. But you know what? Why not both? Two things can be true at the same time. So kind and curious. And the kids, they were starving, like collapsing starving. So naturally, the villagers offer them food. And naturally, the kids forget they're starving and decide they're picky eaters now. They offer them bread, and they're like, no. They offer them meat, and they're like, absolutely not. Milk, hard pass. Can we interest you in some medieval slop? The children recoil like you offered them a feces milkshake. But then someone brings in raw beans still in their pods, and these children perk up. They snatch the beanstalks, crack the pods open, and go to town. And finally, they have something in their bodies besides interdimensional fear. Now, at this point, everyone is thinking the same thing. Like, did these kids escape from some underground vegan cult? But the truth, as it turns out, is even stranger. Because once the kids begin eating, once their systems stabilize and their little green bodies decide not to collapse into mush, they start learning English. And with English comes the first explanation for who they are and where they came from. But before we go to that reveal, we have to talk about what happens next. Because while both children begin adjusting to village life, only the girl survives long enough to tell the tale. The boy, already weak, overwhelmed, terrified, and unable to adapt, falls ill. Even after finding the beans, his emotional support legumes, if you will, he stayed weak. The villagers tried, truly. They fed him, sheltered him, prayed over him, but nothing worked. He couldn't handle the sunlight. He couldn't handle the food. He couldn't handle the shock of being ripped out of his world and dropped into a humid English summer surrounded by strangers. And within weeks, he dies. Medieval England, am I right? I mean, come for the wolf pits, stay for the high mortality rate. The girl, however, she thrives. Her green color fades slowly, eventually disappearing entirely. She learns English quickly. She integrates into the household of Sir Richard, and she becomes, by every account, a fully functioning young woman. And eventually, she sits down and explains, clearly, calmly, and with total sincerity, where she and her brother came from. She calls it the land of St. Martin, a place where everything is twilight. The sun never shines. Everyone is green, and they live in constant dusk like they're trapped forever in a moody Instagram filter. She describes it as a land separated from this one by a great river, and on the other side of that river is a land of bright light, a thing her people could see but never quite reach. She said they were herding her father's cattle one day when they heard a strange sound, like bells, and they followed that sound through a long, dark cavern. And at the other end, a blinding light, a world they didn't recognize. And before they could return, the entrance closed. No way back. And that world was England. They wandered, they panicked, they stumbled into the wolf pits and were found. Luckily, before a wolf also stumbled into the wolf pits. The villagers, and later the chroniclers, record her story without judgment, without embellishment or moral message. They just write it down as a baffling but sincere account. And that is exactly what makes this whole thing eyebrow-raising. If this had been a folktale, it would have had symbolism, moralizing, some kind of, and that's why you don't wander into caves at twilight ending. But it doesn't. It reads like the news, just straight up, nonchalant, These are the facts, and we are presenting them to you. I mean, not modern day news, obviously, but how news should be. Two historians document it. They both write it with a tone that's more like, look, we don't get it either, but these villagers weren't bullshitting. And the girl grows up. She becomes a woman, and she assimilates into English society. Kind of. People say she had a bold, occasionally abrasive personality, as if she was always slightly out of sync with the world she ended up in. She eventually marries a man, lives a normal English life, and dies a normal English death. And that's it. No vanishing act, no return to her world, no final revelation. Just a story that never really resolves. And this is where we get to the million-dollar question. What actually happened in Woolpit? Because nearly every explanation you hear, historical, folkloric, scientific, supernatural, they all hit the brick wall of, yeah, but some of the details don't fit. So let's jump into bed with some of the theories and see which ones feel good. We'll begin with the most boring one, so that way we can just get it out of the way. You know, like eating your vegetables before you can have dessert. One historical theory is the normal human explanation. They were Flemish refugees. This is the most practical explanation. During the 1100s, political turmoil and anti-Flemish violence forced many Flemish families into hiding. The children could have been lost, orphaned, malnourished, speaking Flemish, tinted green from chlorosis anemia. And the land of St. Martin was just a garbled attempt to describe a Flemish village or monastery. This one's tidy, plausible, educational, the kind of explanation teachers give so they don't have to deal with the existential dread of interdimensional children. But it doesn't fit 100% of the way in. It sounds neat, right? Except Woolpit villagers knew Flemish people. For starters, Flemish sounds nothing like the strange language these children were speaking. 12th-century villagers were familiar with Flemings. They weren't aliens, they lived in the region. If the kids had been Flemish, someone would have recognized it. Someone would have said, oh, yeah, these are just the neighbor's kids from across the marsh. Additionally, chlorosis doesn't turn your entire body uniformly green. It causes a sometimes greenish cast, but not like you're fresh out of the Emerald City dermatology clinic. And the big kicker, the girl's description of her homeland is way too specific, detailed, and consistent to be a confused child trying to explain Belgium. So we're going to kick this theory out of bed. It's too mundane. Like, we're going to need a little more spice in our bedroom. Next is the fairy realm theory. This one, delicious, juicy, full of mystique. In Celtic and Anglo-Saxon lore, fairies were beings from a parallel world. The other world, the land under the hill. These places were often dimly lit, like twilight or dusk, lacking direct sunlight, inaccessible except through caves, hills, or underground passages. Full of foods that didn't match ours, and populated by beings who look like humans, but not quite. If you replace fairy realm with land of St. Martin, the parallels become suspicious. The green skin? Fairy folk were often described as strangely colored. Not always green, but green wasn't off the table. The unusual fabric of their clothing. Fairies in lore wore clothes unlike anything human. The refusal to eat human food. Fairies famously could not or would not eat mortal food. Though here they accepted raw beans, which might be closer to what existed in their world. The sudden crossing through a cavern? Classic fairy abduction gateway behavior. The bells. Fairy bells are a major motif, sounds that lure mortals or mark the passage between realms. And look, I realize you might be rolling your eyes at all of this, but go ahead and search fairies in your podcast app. If you're really curious, listen to a couple. You might expand your mind a little. But of course, this is a theory that has its own wrinkle. These kids weren't shimmering magical beings, they were scared, lost, vulnerable, human enough to die of earthly illnesses, human enough to grow up here. So, what were they? They fairies or half fairies or children from a boundary village between realms? Or something else entirely? Now we're getting a little spicier with the interdimensional realm theory. This one proposes the children came from a parallel universe, one slightly adjacent to ours, similar enough to be habitable, but different enough to have dimmer sunlight, different vegetation, altered human pigmentation, and variations in physics or perception. Imagine two Earths layered like transparent sheets. Most of the time, they don't touch, but sometimes, through geological formations, magnetic anomalies, or pure cosmic chaos, the boundary thins. And when it does, things slip. The kids weren't fairies, they were human, just not from our Earth. The cavern? A wormhole, a spatial tunnel, a wrinkle in the cosmic fabric. The bells? Vibrational resonance during the crossing, what her people interpreted as bell-like sounds. It's the kind of theory physicists hate because it's unprovable, but also, kind of vibes. And then another possibility, the time slip theory. What if they didn't come from another world, but another time? And oof, this one gives me chills. Where we're going, we don't need roads kind of chills. P.S. Just watched this movie and 40 years later, it still fucking hits. A far future Earth where sunlight had dimmed, where atmosphere had changed, or where human pigmentation evolved. Or what if they came from the past, from a prehistoric era where human physiology differed? Time slip theories are surprisingly common in folklore. People who suddenly appear wearing strange clothes, speaking strange languages, and vanishing without explanation. But these kids didn't vanish. They stayed. I mean, I guess hitting 88 miles per hour back then wasn't exactly possible, which leaves open the most unnerving idea. What if, occasionally, we lose people across time? What if the universe misfiles its paperwork sometimes? But honestly, none of these theories hold the crown. Although, I'm not kicking this one out of bed. Because the story, at its core, isn't about where the children came from. It's about the rupture they created. It's about the possibility they present. Which brings us to the moment where the medieval chroniclers, those practical, stern, parchment-hoarding monks, admit something interesting. We do not know what these children were. Not demons, not angels or spirits or simple refugees. Something else. Something that made rational men say, we're just going to write this down and hope future generations have the emotional stability to figure it out. Spoiler, we do not. Yet, here we are, centuries later, still talking about the Green Children, still trying to explain an event that really can't be explained. Still, imagining those two terrified little figures emerging from the wolf pit, blinking against the harsh English sun, clutching each other, green skin glowing in the morning light. Still hearing the echo of the bells and still wondering about the world they left behind. A world drenched in twilight, separated by a river reachable only through a cavern none of us have ever found since. But buckle up your emotional support beans because we're not done yet. Because while everyone debates fairy portals and time slips, there's another theory out there that doesn't get nearly enough attention. And that is saying something considering the competition includes interdimensional toddlers and cosmic geological glitches. So allow me to introduce to you the crypto-terrestrial theory, which is a mighty big word for a very small Dana. This one has been growing in popularity among the folklore and UFO community. And honestly, I kind of like it. It scratches a brain itch you didn't even know you had. The theory goes like this. What if the Green Children were not from another planet, but from Earth? Just, again, not our Earth. Not the visible one we tromp all over, destroying with our beloved plastic water bottles and egocentric selfishness, but from an Earth beneath Earth. A hidden civilization, a parallel society, a group of beings, humanoid, advanced, isolated, living underground or inside the planet, more evolved in some ways and less in others. Basically, hi, have you heard about our Lord and Savior, Hollow Earth? Don't get scared, we're not going full conspiracy theory YouTube rabbit hole. But we are talking about a concept that predates the internet by, roughly 1,000 years. That deep within the planet, under caves and caverns and geological layers we haven't even poked with a stick yet, might exist other groups of humans, or near humans, or used to be humans who evolved weird. This isn't as wild as it sounds. Indigenous cultures all over the world have myths about underground peoples. Ant people, a whole underworld city system. The Celts believed in the hollow hills where fairies and beings lived. The Greeks, they had like 4 underworlds, and half of them wanted to judge you, eat you, or flirt with you. So the crypto-terrestrial theory says these kids weren't aliens, they weren't magical, they were neighbors. We just didn't know it. Their green hue, a result of subterranean plant life or mineral exposure. Their clothing, a fabric not woven from above ground crops. Their fear of sunlight, if you've ever stepped outside after 14 hours in a dark room binge watching Bridgerton, imagine doing that after 14 years underground. Their language, a dialect never spoken above Earth's crust. The land of St. Martin being twilight lit, if they lived in a vast cavern ecosystem illuminated by bioluminescence or lava glow, the idea of a sun would be foreign. They'd live in permanent dusk. Honestly, if you've ever been inside a deep cave, you already know. It's like walking into nature's emo phase. But here's where the theory gets juicy. The girl said that her world was separated from another land by a river. Subterranean rivers? They are everywhere. Massive ones, miles long, entire ecosystems built around them. And these aren't tiny babbling brooks. Some of them could swallow a cruise ship whole. Now, imagine you're a crypto-terrestrial kid. You wander too close to a cavern path chasing your cattle. You hear bells, you follow the sound, and the next thing you know, the ground gives way. You fall through a thin geological membrane. Because, that's a thing. And boom, hello England, watch out for the wolf pits. But here's the detail that makes the crypto-terrestrial theory eerily plausible. They didn't act like magical beings. They acted like frightened children. Fairy lore? Fairies are usually mischievous little shits. But these two, terrified, malnourished and confused by every single thing around them, like kids who were never meant to be here. And this theory has one last disturbing, delicious implication. What if cryptoterrestrials still exist? Still living under the crust. Still occasionally slipping out. Still occasionally getting lost. What if the Green Children weren't the first? What if they weren't the last? What if Woolpit was just the one time in history where we got the story written down? Honestly, if someone plopped 2 green kids into my backyard today, I'd say not my business and go back inside. Actually, that's probably not true. I'd end up taking pics, posting them on Instagram, and starting a poll. To see if they were Grinches or Elphaba spawn. And because I love you, and because medieval monks had 0 chill, let's do one last bonus theory. The haunted translation theory. This theory proposes the chroniclers got the story mostly right, but the translation got just messed up enough to make everything 20% creepier, 40% weirder, and 100% more Loreplay friendly. Remember, everything we know about this story came from 2 guys, 2 monks, 2 men whose hobbies included writing about miracles, cataloging sins, and trying not to die of the fucking plague. So, what if green meant ill-looking? What if strange clothes meant they were wearing a fucking goat carcass? What if unknown language meant a dialect that they just didn't understand? And we could keep going. Like, what if Twilight World was actually dense fog? Or what if bells were church bells echoing across the valley? What if cattle herding was, I don't know, actually cattle herding? You get the point. What if the story was true, but the weirdness level was accidentally turned up because shit didn't translate properly? I mean, the 1100s was a long-ass time ago. Still doesn't fully explain the green, though, or why the girl's account is so consistent in both versions, or why the monks, fabulously dramatic creatures they were, did not interpret the children as like demons, which was kind of their whole personality. But it does make you wonder, how much of history is just one awkward translation away from sounding like a portal fantasy? And so, my fellow lore lovers, we end where the story started, with 2 children standing at the mouth of a mystery. 2 kids who came from nowhere, spoke nothing we knew, ate only beans like they were starring in a PETA commercial, and told us of a world we have never found, never mapped, and never explained. A world that might be underground or in another dimension, or across time, or across folklore, or across a translation error that was so big it achieved immortality. But the truth, some stories aren't meant to be solved. Some stories exist to poke at us, to whisper, to haunt the edges of what we consider possible. And the Green Children of Woolpit, they are one of those stories. Now, to answer the question you have all been waiting for since this episode started, were the Green Children of Woolpit an inspiration for the actual Grinch? It would make sense, right? Green tint skin, not of this world, eats weird things, has to shave at 8 years old. So I did some digging so you didn't have to. And guess what? Dr. Seuss didn't give a flying fuckeroni about the Green Children of Woolpit. Probably never even heard of them. His actual inspiration for the Grinch was himself. Yeah, apparently he looked in the mirror one Christmas day and saw some Grinch-like qualities that inspired him to write the story. Which tracks, I guess. I mean, he's definitely a controversial character himself. But he did give us bangers like 1 foot, 2 foot, red fish, blue balls, or however it goes. But alas, no, the Grinch is not inspired by the Green Children of Woolpit, which is unfortunate because I thought we were going to tie this all together in a big green bow. Instead, we'll have to imagine them as mini Shreks or Elphabas, or maybe Shrek and Elphaba babies. Ew. I'm sorry I did that to you. Anyways, if you forgive me, leave me 5 stars and share with a friend. And until next time, if the bells are ringing, okay? Anyways, until next time, if you hear the bells ringing, maybe don't follow them into a cave and transport into another dimension. Okay, McFly?